Welcome back at BartlikBartlik YouTube channel for more construction basic knowledge. Yeah, our last video we did, it was about caissons, and now today I'm going to do another one that is to familiarize ourselves or to educate ourselves on driven piles. Remember our last video that we talked about underwater construction. We mentioned the methods on which underwater construction are done, or rather we mentioned the techniques on which to enable the underwater construction to undertake place. And we did say that we have caissons as one technique. We said cofferdam as another technique. We said driven piles as another technique, and then we said offsite building or float. So the other video we elaborated on caissons, and now today for this one we are going to elaborate on driven piles. And driven piles. So we are going to talk about these driven piles, and we are just going to start by defining what driven piles are. And driven piles foundations, these are used in low-rise buildings and bridge construction. Yeah, they are used in low-rise buildings and bridge construction mainly. And when the topsoil is not in good condition, and when it does not have the adequate bearing capacity, that is to resist the load from the superstructure, a driven pile is used. So the driven piles, it is a type of pile that inserted up to the hard layer in the soil, where it can provide the required end bearing and skin friction. Since the cost of construction is less when compared with the cast in situ board piles, these types of piling work are more popular in bridge construction. They are more popular in bridge construction. Yeah. So in these driven piles, we have got types of driven piles, and we are going to mention them as you see them also on the pictures in our video. So number one type of driven pile is the steel piles. The steel piles, you can see them. That is this is how steel piles looks like. So number one is steel piles. And then number two, we have precast concrete piles. Precast concrete piles. Also, you can see the picture. This is what we mean by precast concrete pile. And then you have got timber pile or timber piles. So this is how timber piles look like, timber pile. And then we have got number four type of driven piles is composite piles. Composite piles, again you can see how composite piles look like. So I think we will have to discuss each of these driven piles that we have mentioned separately. So let us discuss about the steel driven piles. So steel driven piles, these are different types of driven piles, that is constructed from steel, as the name suggests. Since the steel is readily available, construction can be done quite easily. So as the name suggests, the steel driven piles, so these are types of driven piles that are made from steel. Yeah, and you can see This is what we mean by a steel driven pile. Under this type of steel driven piles, we also have got types that fall under these steel driven piles. So type number one, we have got the micro piles. Micro pile under steel driven pile. So micro pile are steel casinos filled with concrete. Further, depending on the applied loads, the pile diameter can be increased based on the applied load. If required, a reinforcement cage can be also inserted into the pile. That is to increase the pile load and to enable it carry the capacity. And then the pile design can be done as guided because for you to do this type of micro pile, that is under steel driven pile, of course design is normally done. And then still again under this steel driven pile, we have got the H pile. So the H pile, this is a hot rolled section. They are used in the construction. So they are welded together to increase the length. So these types of piling construction are not widely used in the construction. However, on special occasions, H piles can be used. So under steel driven piles, I've mentioned that we have number one, micro pile, that falls under steel driven pile, and then we have the H pile. H pile, we have said that it is just a rolled section used in construction. They are welded together, that is to increase the length of this pile, and they are used on special occasions. Still under this steel driven pile, we have got steel box pile. Steel box pile. And for steel box pile, these steel sheets, they are welded together. The steel sheets are welded together to create a box shape like. So the sheet piles are welded together to create a hollow box section to be used in the construction. So that is what we mean by steel box pile. And then we have got screw pile. Screw pile. These are piles under steel driven piles. So we have got screw pile. It is a cast iron screw shaped pile, and they are driven by rotary or drilling, and they are not that popular types of piles. They are not that popular types of piles used in construction, but that is also another type of steel driven pile. It is known as a cast iron screw, or rather it is known as a screw pile. Screw pile. So screw pile, I've said that it is just a cast. It is a cast iron screw shape. It is a cast iron screw shape pile, and I've said that they are not widely used. So depending on the nature of the soil, as per the purpose of using, different diameters could be used in the construction. So that is what we mean by screw piles, and it is still under steel driven pile. And then lastly, under steel driven pile, we have got steel railed pile. Steel railed pile. So old rails have been steel piles. So these rails are welded at the top or bottom, but welding is used to join two sections. That's to increase the length of the pile. Since these piles are from abundant material, the cost will be less, and it could be considered as green construction as we reuse the material. So let me just do a recap that is under steel driven piles. But before I do that recap under steel driven piles, let us remind ourselves that we have said the topic is on driven piles, and on these driven piles we have said we have got different types of driven piles, and these different types of driven piles we have said we have got steel pile, we have got a precast concrete pile, we have got a timber pile, and we have got a composite pile. But then under these types of piles we have got also different types of piles under them. So like for the steel piles, for the steel driven piles we have got micro pile, we have got H piles, and we have got a steel box pile, and the screw pile, and we have the steel railed piles. Okay, let's go to another type of driven pile, or rather yeah, let's go to another type of driven pile, and here we are going to talk about now the precast concrete driven pile. Remember the first one we were talking about the steel driven pile. So the second one is the precast concrete driven pile. So the mostly widely used type of driven pile in construction. Mainly there are two types of precast piles. There are two types of precast piles, and normally reinforced precast piles and pre-stressed piles. Those are the two types of precast concrete driven piles. So under precast concrete driven pile we have the reinforced precast pile and the pre-stressed pile. So let me just highlight the key points that is in relation to these precast piles. So we will say that number one, these piles can carry high bending and axial stress. They can carry high bending and axial stress. Again, from the picture you can have a view of what we mean by precast concrete driven pile. And then number two, the key points on these the key point on this type of pile, the precast concrete driven pile, is that piles constructed with adequate cover and grade of concrete are not subjected to deteriorations. So therefore these piles are more durable. They are more durable. However, the composition of concrete, that's the porosity of the aggregates cover to the reinforcement, it could cause deterioration of the piles. So that's it's a disadvantage. So whereby when during the making of these piles, there must be very keen supervision. So as a result, durability issues could reduce the lifetime of this type of piles. And then use of sound and hard aggregate, that's proper mix design, proper placing, compacting of concrete, proper curing of concrete, etc. This will improve the durability of concrete, as you understand in concrete technology. The minimum cover could be maintained at 50 millimeter. That is as a durability requirement. And then further pre-stressing reduce the cracking of the concrete. Yeah, so that's all about precast concrete driven pile. And a recap is that under precast concrete driven pile we have got two types: the reinforced precast pile and the pre-stressed pile. Right, so I hope we are together as we continue with this discussion on driven piles. So let us look on timber piles. Let us discuss something about timber piles. Timber piles, let us see the basic things about these types of piles. Is that number one, timber piles can be in different dimensions, having different load capacities. And then they are not widely used due to the low load carrying capacity. They don't carry more load. Also, trees are used as timber pile. That is after removing the branches. Yeah, that is the after removing the branches. The bottom diameter could be in the range of maybe between 300 to 500 millimeters, and the top diameter could be in the range of 125 to 250 millimeters. And generally, piles are available in length ranging from 9 meters to 18 meters. So the pile can bear the applied loads and driving forces. However, it is vulnerable if hard driving is done. So timber piles are vulnerable to deteriorations. So basically that is what I can talk about timber piles. Alright, let us go to the next one, which is the composite pile. The composite pile. So composite piles, these are different materials are used to construct composite piles. As the name suggests, composite means use of different materials to come up with something. So composite piles, they are done using different materials. The selection of the materials shall be done that is to suit the conditions, and the following combinations could be expected. So number one is that timber pile is embedded below the existing ground level and above the existing ground level to be constructed from concrete. So that is a composite pile. Also, a composite pile, concrete filled steel pile or H iron place, lower part of the pile and upper section to be constructed from concrete. So also that is a composite pile. Remember, composite, it means use of two or more materials to make up something. So that is what we mean by composite pile. So this is all about piles, and we will, or rather we can just mention how construction of driven piles is done, since the precast piles are widely used in the construction. So let's see what are the importance, or rather the important aspect of driven piles. Mainly there are two methods for pile driving. And one method is by the conventional method. So apply a force on the pile by letting a weight to fall into the pile, and then the applied load shall be calculated based on the free fall height of the weight. That's what we mean by the conventional method. You just apply the force on the pile by letting a weight to fall into the pile, and then the applied load shall be calculated, that is based on the free fall height of the weight. It shall be made sure that the applied load will not exceed the capacity of the driven pile. And then another method of constructing a driven pile is by hammer driving method. The hammer driving method. The hammer driving method, there are three types of driving methods. there are three types of driving methods, and these are we have got diesel hammer driving, we have air hammer driving, and then we have vibratory hammer driving. So hammer driving methods are easy to use when compared with the conventional method, which requires more time. And generally, precast piles are constructed in length of 6 meters due to transportation issues. However, if required, they can be constructed even 12 meters or higher as may be required. So when 6 meter driven pile are used and depth to be driven more than 6 meter, two piles need to be combined, and steel plates embedded at the top of the piles are welded together to increase the length. So those are the two methods of constructing driven piles, or those are the two methods on how to drive the piles into the ground. We have said we have the conventional method, whereby the conventional method is you apply a force on the pile, that is by letting a weight to fall into the pile, and then the applied load shall be calculated based on the free fall height of the weight. So that is method number one of driving a pile into the ground, the conventional method. And then method number two is using the hammer driving method, the hammer driving method. And under hammer driving method, we have mentioned we have got diesel hammer driving, we have got air hammer driving, and we have got vibratory hammer driving. So for our viewers, don't be lost. The topic is about driven piles. And remember, this is one of the underwater construction technique. Apart from using caisson, cofferdam, we also have driven pile, and this is what we are talking about. This is the topic for today, driven pile. So let me just do a recap again. Let me just do a recap about these driven piles. We have said under driven piles we have got types of driven piles, and the types of driven piles, we have steel piles, we have got precast concrete piles, we have got timber piles, and we have got composite piles. And again, under steel driven piles, we have got also different types of steel driven piles. And under steel driven piles, we have got the micro piles, we have got the H piles, we have got the steel box piles, and we have got the screw pile. And then lastly, under steel driven pile, we have got steel railed pile. Yeah, so that is a recap. And for the precast concrete driven pile, we have said we have got also two types under this type of pile. We have got the reinforced precast pile and the pre-stressed pile. And then lastly, we have the timber piles. So that is about the driven piles. And again, I mentioned about how construction driven piles are done, and I've said we have got two methods. We have got the conventional method, and we have the hammer driving method, whereby I've said that for the conventional method, a force is applied on the pile, that is by letting a weight to fall onto the pile, and the applied load shall be calculated based on the free fall height of the weight. And then number two way of driving a pile is by hammer driving method, whereby under hammer driving method we have got three types. We have the diesel hammer driving, we have the air hammer driving, and we have the vibratory hammer driving. So advantages, let us talk about advantages of driven piles. So we are going to mention the advantages of driven pile, as well as we will mention the disadvantages of these driven piles. So advantage number one is that not like board cast in situ piles, driven piles can be prefabricated, and it minimizes the construction error and adequate quality control can be done. That's the first advantage for the driven pile. And then advantage number two is that any defect such as honeycombs can be repaired in advance before the installation. Yeah. Advantage number two, I've said that the defects such as honeycombs can be repaired in advance, that is before the installation. Since piles are driven against the soil pressure, so it improves the bearing of the soil with the compaction made by the tip of the pile. Because you see, for you to drive the pile into the ground, you have to, there is that compaction. So it is an advantage of building up the bearing capacity of the soil. And then we have less duration and less involvement of labor and machinery. And then we have the pile can be installed inclined to carry the lateral loads. So widely used in bridge constructions. And the involvement of the technical staff is also less. And there is no impact by the groundwater table on construction again. And the time taken to cast is cinch pile. Sorry, the time taken to cast is very less, therefore more suitable for speedy constructions. Let me go through about the disadvantages. Is that for the disadvantage is, I'll just mention a few. Proper planning is required before starting the construction to handle equipment. That is one of the disadvantages. And transportations. And then they cannot carry heavy loads. Driven piles can't carry heavy loads generally. And then structural design shall be checked for the transportation loads. Especially attention shall be made for the pre-stressed concrete piles. Yeah. So since the depth of the pile or length of the pile varies from location to location, the length of the pile cannot be predetermined. Therefore, piles need to be joint and hack the excess. Noise in the installation process shall be controlled. Vibration shall also be controlled, you see. And if the length of the piles available is not adequate, they need to connect together to have adequate depth. It could worst bit of the new pile. So those are the advantages and disadvantages of doing driven piles. Thank you, and please continue subscribing.